Growth Pod is brought to you by Genero, a leading growth agency in the Nordics. We interview marketing experts, business leaders, and entrepreneurs to uncover the stories and strategies behind profitable growth.
Axel, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Excited to talk about kind of the intersection between industrial manufacturing, mature companies, and technology and startups, which you, both because of your background and what you're currently doing, is kind of really well positioned to talk about. So we're going to talk about Kvanted, the industrial kind of deep tech fund that you launched together with the team in about 2.5 years ago. First fund, 70 million euros, and made 12 investments so far. But before we get to that, could you give a brief background on your professional background and what led you to Kvanted?
If we go kind of back a little bit, I think when someone asked me, and this is what I've been told, when someone asked me when I was 5, what they want to become when you grow old, I've always said a kind of an engineer. So it was never, police or whatever. It was always kind of an engineer. And I actually, started off as an engineer and went to, at that time, TKK. And at some point, I guess I realized I'm never going to be the best engineer, and also had this kind of thoughts about kind of business and so on. So I did a master's in finance as well, and ended up on a kind of consulting track. So I went to Bain & Company, after that into private equity with the Altor, so a kind of a larger buyout fund in Sweden. And then, as you said, in 23 started Kvanted. And I think for me, the kind of the red thread, or what has been constant during my career, has always been the industrial angle. And I can't explain it, but I was, walking into a factory has always been, just kind of this wow experience for me. And just, physical systems, products, and, seeing it, kind of smelling it, have always made me kind of super excited. And I think that's the journey that we're on with Kvanted as well. Kind of the real world and the real economy.
Yeah, there's something. It's very tangible, right? You can see the factory; it's producing these products, and it's producing them at massive scale and good quality. It's impressive. Especially with an engineering background, you can appreciate all the engineering that goes into a very well-run factory.
Yeah, it's kind of craftsmanship, and for me personally, I've always worked as an investor or a consultant, in different role, consultant, investor, board member in these companies, and it's obviously kind of less tangible, right? You work through, meetings and materials and Excels and PowerPoints.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's always why I've been that fascinated then with kind of the real things in a way.
Yeah. And so Kvanted, with the strategy you have of specifically focusing kind of industrial tech, are you the first and the only fund in Europe that has that focus? And if so, where did the idea come from to start, to make the jump from PE to VC, which I guess is not very common?
Yeah. It's always dangerous to say, right, that you are the only one, because there's usually a reason why no one else is there. So I'll put it like this. I think there's a lot of funds and capital kind of in the sectors that we invest in and that we're going to invest in. But there are very few that has taken a kind of a pure play approach. So kind of a very kind of specialized, verticalized, thinking in the investment. We're not the only one. There are some funds in Europe that has, similarities to us, but they usually have another leg than in life sciences or something else.
Yeah.
So, if you look at the kind of then the Nordic lens, we are quite unique in kind of how we are positioning ourselves in the market and how kind of focused we want to be. And that is kind of, I guess, the whole reason also why we started Kvanted. So I think we obviously like the thematically the space, not the least because that's what we know. That's kind of the only thing we know in a way. And there are kind of macro tailwinds, supporting that kind of theme in a way. So you have obviously political pressure in Europe to succeed in these strategic kind of industrial deep technologies. You have on the technology side a lot that has happened that now kind of enables these companies to scale. I mean, not the least AI, but it's not the only one. Hardware cost is dropping, and you're able to, for example, train robots in a way that you just weren't able to do before. So that's the kind of thematic approach, and then we believe, our kind of core belief on why we are doing this is that we think kind of a specialist in this segment is kind of better positioned to succeed than a generalist, given that they are very specific type of customer behavior, sales cycles, etc. And then the third one, what you kind of alluded to earlier on the kind of competitive side, that we think there is room for a kind of specialized industrial deep tech player to emerge, also on a larger scale in Europe, which is kind of part of our long-term vision.
One, I guess, effect of having that very specific vertical focus is you're not as geographically constrained. I was looking through your portfolio, and I feel like almost there was, I think 12 investment, and it was like not quite, but like almost 12 different countries. So you're investing in Switzerland, I think, in Iceland, in Finland, in Estonia, all over the place. So I'm guessing that is very rare for a fund, for a Nordic fund, especially a first-time fund, to be that geographically, broad.
Yeah.
Would you say?
Definitely, yes. And I think we started off by being kind of very dispersed, or like, looking at the very kind of broad area. And I think there is a balance. So you can do kind of specialist and be good at what you do, and then look in a kind of broader region. But obviously this is still venture, and venture is local or kind of semi-local, regional. So I think we're still finding our way. Where we are kind of taking it now is still to be, having kind of Finland as our home base, and having kind of Zurich as a kind of second base. And then from these countries, kind of look, to the Nordics, but also from Zurich then to kind of Germany and Munich. So I agree with you. We have a kind of a geographically a wider net than usually fund. It also, of course, depends on the stage. I mean, so if you go very, very early, you're going to be super local, and the later you go, the broader your geographic kind of net in a way will be.
Why Zurich? Why Finland? Why Zurich? What's happening there?
Yeah, it's a very, clear reason. So if you start by kind of top down, why Europe? In a way,
well,
I think that's kind of where you need to start, or that's the questions that you get. The fact is that if of the top 10, global universities, when you look at engineering and physical sciences, 3 of them are in Europe. And so, we've always had the innovations, and we've never been able to kind of, commercialize them in a way. And now, there is this next generation of founders through some breakout cases that are then, according to, to us, hopefully, now have the kind of the toolkit and the experiences to actually kind of scale companies in these sectors. But if you then look at the kind of the Nordics and look at kind of spin out value created per capita, Finland, Sweden, Denmark are actually all in the top 5. Okay. And there is one country leading the pack by far, and that is Switzerland. So ETH Zurich. So they've spun out, I think, 650-ish companies so far from that university. Last year they spun out 1 company a week, and they have a lot of the kind of industrial backbone. We have the ABBs of the world, very strong in robotics, and now we have many of the kind of big tech companies also moving to Zurich. So it's just a very strong ecosystem, and it's surprising with all the capital that you should have there. It's actually quite immature still on the venture side. So we think there's kind of a good match of a lot of things happening on a grassroots level, but it's not kind of overflood with capital yet. So that's why we see we have an opportunity there. And it's also kind of a small enough ecosystem. If you compare it to Finland, there are some similarities on the kind of economy in a way compared to Finland. So
okay, that's really interesting, and it seemed probably a quite original or kind of bold bet. Like a typical approach would be to go from Helsinki to maybe to Stockholm or Estonia or Copenhagen.
Yeah.
But it
and I think it's from the focus that we have. I mean, so robotics is obviously one core team that we look at, and we think the probability that there's a higher probability that the next big robotics company will come from that region than it is that it will come from Sweden or Norway.
Sure.
So I think we need to go. I mean, how we think about it is through ecosystems, and the ecosystems can be quite small or hidden. So I mean, the obvious one in Finland is kind of quantum, right? So Helsinki was just selected as the second most, dense kind of quantum ecosystem.
Who was number one?
I actually don't even remember. I think it was probably some specific region in the US or in UK, but I don't remember which one it was. So that's a kind of obvious one that is kind of already spoken about. But there are other kind of more local ecosystems. We just invested in a laser company. I think it's actually published today up in Tampere. And it's something that is not spoken about, but there is a massive concentration of talent and know-how and experience in kind of the broader kind of laser ecosystem in Tampere. And then you look at Zurich, right? You have it the same in robotics. So I think you need to kind of peel the onion a little bit when you think about where you need to be present and areas you need to focus on. It's not a kind of one size fits all. Let's go to Sweden.
Yeah,
I think if you want to kind of really find the kind of hidden gems in a way.
Yeah. And that's the thing about VC, right? You need to be early in a sense.
Yeah.
Not too early, but you can't just be a follower because you're not going to get the returns.
Yeah.
Okay, I wanted to go back to kind of the beginning. We were talking before we started recording. One of the benefits you guys had was a strong anchor investor, allow you to raise a fund, first fund, which significant size, quite very quickly. Yeah. But still, it's never easy to launch any new business, and this is not exception. So, what was the first investment like? What was the first year like? You're going about creating deal flow. Yeah. Can you talk us through the beginning of starting a new fund?
Yeah, I mean, we are a startup. That's what we are. Even though we are in the format of a fund, we are still a startup. So it was a lot of practical stuff, admin things that needed to be solved. But it was a good time, the beginning. You're a little bit kind of in a honeymoon phase, right? The world is your oyster, and everything is fun. And then at some point you start realizing that it's a lot of work. There are so many kind of work streams in a way that you need to run at the same time. I mean, it's new investments, it's managing the portfolio, helping out your portfolio, which is obviously the most important thing. It's also recruitment for the fund. It's thinking about what are we going to do next as a fund in terms of strategy, geographic focus, and then it's also fundraising. Started to building kind of a pipeline for that. It's positioning, branding, marketing, which is obviously very important in this industry as well. So there's a lot of things. I think maybe I think some people have a kind of a little bit skewed kind of view on as we sit there and just invest. It's a kind of quite a big package that you need to kind of manage. Yeah. And the world, is changing all the time. And we have a kind of some our kind of core beliefs and a kind of conviction on the thematically on what we are investing in, but also in that space, things change. I mean, geopolitics, technological advancements, what competition is doing, for example, in robotics, right? So there's a lot of happening all the time. So you need to kind of be on the pulse and kind of build a new conviction and find theses kind of within these larger themes. So yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting because like you said, running a VC fund, starting a VC fund, or especially maybe VC fund, there's both a lot of just work you need to do. There's a lot of people you need to meet and build relationships. Yeah. But then you also have this thing like this cognitive intellectual demand on you. Because I had lunch yesterday with an investor who's like early stage, and we were talking about the fact that things are changing so fast now. And when you're investing in early stage, you're investing at the tip of the spear, like where the change is the fastest. And you're investing in all these different sectors. And you're flooded with information. And you have to try to navigate it and have some kind of theme or hypothesis and learn new things and feel always like you're falling behind and probably feel like you're stupid because there's always new stuff coming up. So, can you talk about, like, does that resonate, that piece of just like the intellectual challenge of trying to navigate all this change and find opportunity before everyone else?
Yeah. I think what I've found challenging, and it's kind of linked to that, is the kind of amount of noise on the. I think it's true for all aspects of society, I guess, at the moment, right? You're just overflooded all the time, on everything, and it's difficult to see what is true and what is not. I'll take an example, on humanoid robots, right? Based on the, videos you see on LinkedIn, you could make the conclusion that it has kind of been solved, that, humanoids will be around us, next year, everything is done. And then when you, dig a little bit kind of deeper, you realize that, that's probably not the case. And that, I mean, it's maybe a stupid example, but that influences kind of your thesis, for example, in robotics, on what are the places that you can do. And it's true for, a lot of the sectors. So what was actually your question?
Just the challenge of having kind of having an original contrarian thesis, that developing that. Yeah. And obviously it can't just be contrarian, it has to be correct. So it delivers the returns.
Yeah. Or it can't be, it's not going to be, it's difficult to say correct, and I think that's what I've also had to learn in venture. If you are truly kind of investing at the frontier in a way, I mean, obviously you need to have a thesis, but kind of looking at the world 10 years from now is not linear. It's difficult to say. Correct or not, and it's going to pivot and so on. It can be kind of a logical steps, and I think that I think is very important. I mean, you can have visions are important, big bold ideas are important, but there also needs to be some logical arguments on why, why it will look that way, and I think that's an area where some founders kind of fail in a way that they think that the way to get people interested in is talk Elon Musk language, talk very big things, but there's no path there, and that's what kind of maybe comes from my more my kind of private equity background, that obviously there needs to be a big vision, and it's easier to get funding for difficult things than easy things, because difficult things are exciting. But you need to kind of build a logical argumentation or narrative why, and it's also kind of from a financial side, right? It's okay not to make you don't have to be profitable now. but there needs to be a kind of a path to profitability, which is kind of logical.
Yeah.
You know, if this happens, you know, X, Y, Z will happen, and then we become kind of profitable. But that link is often doesn't exist with many founders or startups.
Yeah, and I feel like it's hard to have, especially in the same person, someone who has a visionary ability to see the future, and then also break it down into, okay, this requires us to deliver this service first, so we can fund the next development and da.
But I don't think it's I think that's kind of critical. For me, it's essential. And the people with big ideas that succeed, I mean, I don't think they succeed because they have very big ideas. They kind of succeed because they know how to get there. So, you know, my kind of very simple, and, you know, when I also look at founders and companies, is that there's a plan. There needs to be a plan, and I think the people that succeed, you know, in a big way, they do have a plan. They know how to get there. Obviously, they need to kind of, you know, there are things where they need to pivot, but in their head, they have steps how to get there.
Yeah.
It's not like, you know, we know how to take this first step, and then there's, you know, 50 steps, and there's a big vision, but I have no idea how to get there. I don't think that's. I don't think the big success cases come out from that kind of thinking in a way. I think it's a little bit more boring than people think.
Yeah, I agree. It's not, people don't make those big leaps at once. The successful people are the ones who can take those small steps very quickly.
Yeah, exactly. And not everything needs to be, obviously, it cannot be fully planned out. But kind of you have a very clear direction, at least, on the kind of the continuous improvement or steps that you need to take.
For sure.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about the kind of industrial, you know, industrial manufacturing and what's happening there. But first, because you mentioned humanoids, is there anything, you're looking at a lot of different technologies and how AI is being applied. Are there areas where you think that are currently like overhyped, like maybe humanoids? And are there things where people, maybe especially like industrial applications, where things are, you think that we're going to see real improvements and people are not paying attention to it at the moment?
Yeah. I mean, we spoke about robotics. There are very many robotics companies in Europe now. You know, on a kind of grassroots level, there are, you know, hundreds, even, you know, thousands, maybe a little bit kind of how you define it. And obviously, not all of them are going to make money. Very few, you know, fraction of them are going to make money. And there's a little bit of this kind of narrative that, you know, just build it and then we'll figure out the kind of the business model and how we make money afterwards. And I think the especially in robotics, I think it will come, you know, sooner than later. That you need to have a business model and a kind of a deployment model and a go-to-market model and a scaling model. But and currently it's a little bit, you know, we do this kind of R&D, you know, interesting things here, but the kind of the path to monetization is maybe not there. Then on the other hand, I don't think it's a specific thing, but again, there are a lot of new tools in kind of AI where you get, you know, benefits long term that are coming up. So I'll give an example. We have a French company called Samp AI. They can create with their AI a kind of complete 3D visualization of factories. And it's not kind of a, you know, the benefit is not instant and it's going to take time, but the kind of the return on investment, you know, long term is massive. So there are things where, you know, the kind of the short term expectations are a little bit kind of too high, but then the kind of the long term return on investment for some areas is going to be larger than I think people think. And it's still new. I mean, a lot of this is new, so it's difficult to. People are still trying to find proof points. What works and what doesn't work, and obviously things move quite slowly in the industrial sector.
In the case of the startup, because I looked into that a little bit, and I think it's really interesting application. Is the idea that this will allow to find bottlenecks in production or with maintenance or build out a
it's
factory?
Primarily maintenance, but there's also kind of safety aspects.
Sure. Yeah.
Of knowing where a specific valve is with kind of risk for gas explosions. Kind of, and they actually don't know now where they are often because you've been doing maintenance for 50 years on these kind of old legacy facilities which are massive in scale.
The really interesting thing I find with startups is because there's so many, there's always some startup working on a very specific application problem that if you don't know, that you had no idea that, actually, now that you explained it, makes a lot of sense. Like, of course, that would a lot of big factories would need that. So we're probably going to see them use AI and these other tools to solve like millions of small problems across the entire value chain, and cumulative effect is going to be cheaper, safer, better.
And I think that, and actually on that, and that's kind of where we obviously spend a lot of time on how small are the problems. I mean, from our investor perspective, you kind of often talk about kind of point solutions, and how big can this kind of point solution scale in a way, so you get kind of venture returns. And there's the eternal balancing of a kind of entry into these companies and an entry product. But how do you then kind of create the large enough, platform kind of thinking that it's not only, the kind of end game is not the point solution, but you can actually kind of build something bigger, but you need to get in somehow into these large industrial enterprises. So I think our thinking has evolved quite a bit in terms of that they still need to be mission critical in a way, and you need to see the return on investment quite early. And no one's gonna buy them for the fun of it, or it's kind of nice to have. I mean, maybe a couple of companies would buy it, but you're never going to scale it. So there needs to be mission critical, and there needs to be a kind of a plan of how you go more in a way horizontal in these companies as well.
Yeah. Let's talk about kind of the mature industrial industry. One fact or one stat that you mentioned, which is roughly that about 20% of VC capital in Europe comes from industry, and in Finland the number is 2%. And we have obviously historically pulp and paper, big industries. We still have like mature major industrial companies. Why is the number so low? Is there a big disconnect between startups and what these major companies are doing, and if so, why?
I mean, I think that the numbers from Europe is also obviously from the kind of family offices from these industrial kind of heritage assets. So it's not only capital coming from them, but I think if you look at Finland, obviously we've been quite in flux and a volatile period. I mean, you mentioned some of the industrial sectors that are prominent here. They've been in a pretty big downturn for a very long time, and a lot of the companies that we have here have been struggling with growth for a longer time. So I think it's a kind of a lack of confidence, and there's been so much happening here. COVID is obviously universal, but you have Russia, etc. So I think there's been kind of bigger fish to fry for quite some years, with the risk that you never look long term. But it's not an easy. I don't think no one has cracked the model exactly. How do you participate in these frontier technologies from an industrial company perspective? I mean, it's the CVCs that we spoke about a little bit earlier. They have never succeeded in any good way.
Corporate venture.
Yeah, so the corporate venture arms. Then there is the model of making investment in the funds, but how do you do that kind of cooperation in a meaningful way? But Nokia did it with Nokia Growth Partners. I think they've probably seen a lot of strategic kind of benefits from that, but it's the kind of internal balancing of kind of financial and strategic benefits. But I can't put my finger on it, but my feeling is that there is more, just from a kind of political point of view as well now, in if you talk about kind of Finland specifically, just on the venture segment, right? We have to succeed. The time is now, and we can't wait anymore. And I think that is also going to be reflected in all the industrial companies that we have here. There is a kind of from the owner's perspective, just more pressure and willingness to kind of take risk, because I think everybody realizes at this point that there is no other way than to take, look at new technologies and take risk on that front. Otherwise, we will never get out of this kind of hole that we're in.
So do you think startups, whether investing here, startups here in Finland, or just using technologies from startups, have a realistic chance at improving the fortunes of these major industrial companies, not just in Finland, but in Europe, like to stay competitive against Asia, or with the tariffs in the United States and things like that? Like, is it enough to take these different tools that are going to help out a little bit? Safety here, increased automation here?
Yeah, no. I mean, I think the answer is no. If you look at kind of what we invest in, so we have kind of two different portfolios. We have one which is the industrial software that I mentioned, the kind of where we think about kind of mission critical systems for them, and it can either be kind of a make things more efficient in a cost way, or it's create new business. And then on the deep tech side, we obviously have kind of standalone product companies that are going to be scaling on their own with an own offering. And then you have some companies that are kind of in between. They have their own kind of full hardware plus software offering, but the problem that they're solving is doing tasks in a more efficient way. So they're kind of selling outcomes in a way. So I mean, the companies that we invest in, and when they work with the industrial companies, the answer is no. They're not gonna save them. Yeah. But they can find new revenue streams and kind of get do better customer service, etc. Yeah.
What do you think about because you talked before we started recording as well about Sweden, and for instance, Sweden you have Wallenberg, major family, and others as well, and we don't really have that in Finland. We don't have as much capital, but we also have these traditions of these family-owned industrial companies, or families that are very active in the industry. Is that a disadvantage for us here when it comes to there's not that level of active ownership and long-term thinking and investment, and do we have this on one hand we want growth, we want productivity, but on the other hand we also want safety, stability, dividends, and there's no one at the wheel pushing for the direction, no one with the mandate to go in and say, hey, we need to actually invest, like make serious investments now. What do you think?
Definitely. I mean, I think that's one of the core problems that we have, and I mean, I think it's nothing new that we don't have. No. We don't have the capital here in Finland, and I think the only way to get out of it is to really take a 10-20 year horizon on it, and it's challenging, and I think the ones that we should do everything we can that the ones that are actually ready to take that risk and take that horizon, that we keep them, keep them here and keep them happy and give them the kind of the tools to do it. Without that, 20-year horizon thinking, 10-year horizon thinking, as I said from the beginning, we will never get out of the kind of the hole that we have dug for ourselves.
A question, because you're, like I said, at the intersection of both tech and like these big companies, I understand how they think. Now that the change is so fast in, well, maybe not in the industrial side, but certainly in AI and so forth. What does that? How does it have an impact? And if so, what kind of impact does it have on investment decisions long term? Do these investment decisions get pushed back a little bit because there's so much change happening? So companies are less certain on where to put. I mean, if we think back like 100 years, there wasn't that much change. So you're going to build a new paper factory or pulp factory, whatever. You know that, okay, we're going to have access to labor. We're going to have access to the raw materials. If the political situation is going to be stable and financing is okay, then we can make that decision. But now, when things are just changing across the field, does that impact these big decisions or being industrial decisions, or is it just completely unrelated?
I don't think. I mean, I think it's more kind of a geopolitical things that kind of impact now. How do you think about investments? And I know that it feels now for everyone that AI is changing everything and it's completely new and we've never been here before. And I'm still young. I wasn't through the whole kind of I wasn't around, but I didn't really understand what was happening back in the 90s with the internet and so on. So I fundamentally believe that the world has not changed in a way that you couldn't kind of make investment decisions just because things are changing. I think things have always changed, just in a kind of a different in a different way. So I don't think that's holding back. I don't think that's holding back kind of investment decisions in any meaningful way.
But the geopolitical stuff is very real, because
it's very real. Yeah.
That could, I mean, if tariff changes have a huge impact on the business, if that's something you're exposed to.
I mean that's really impacting. I mean, think about. I mean, the Chinese have. I mean, you literally have the state budget against you in some certain strategic sectors. Right, they're over-investing, so they're not even looking at the return on their investment. It's absolutely very difficult to compete then, in Europe.
Should we? I mean, that goes into like state-run economies and social economies. But should we in Europe, if we think manufacturing capabilities, if that's a matter of national security, securing supply chains, should Europe, should Finland be? Should the state have? Should there be some kind of like Manhattan Project level stuff going on? Or are we just? Look at what's happening now with the EV. Germany's, I mean, they're struggling massively, and it's what they have like 3 or 4 million jobs. Probably more if you like indirect. You think about supply chain. I mean, it's critical to them.
I mean, maybe I'm not commenting on kind of the.
If you should go,
but I think what I'm concerned about is we need to be competitive on cost. The Chinese are already there in quality. I mean, everybody knows this. So we need to be competitive on cost, and that probably means that we need to automate a lot more in the production. There's this talk about kind of dark factories, so 24/7, no human intervention, right? And I think they're coming sooner than we think, and that's definitely an area that we need to be kind of open about. And what does that actually mean? Obviously, it's every single individual company that makes these decisions, but from kind of a regulatory perspective, I think we need to get production back to to Finland as well, at least kind of regionally. Not only from a defense and national security perspective, I think that's critical. And if we never, being able to produce physical systems and products, I think is kind of critical. It's kind of what the whole society is built on. It was somehow, people talk about this ad spend optimizing AI tools, which is So we need to be able to produce things if we want to defend ourselves also in the future. And once they're out, the know-how, the supply chains, when everything is gone, I think it's very difficult to get it back. I mean, partly it's already gone, but we can try to at least build some of it back and become good at that.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that people don't realize is how hard it is to get back. Just because we had it once. I mean, this feels, it's like the fall of Roman Empire, and these people were walking around these buildings that they had no idea how to recreate. And like when the capacity was gone, it's gone.
Yeah. Exactly. It's capacity and know-how and the people that know what they're kind of doing. And then it's the supply chains. So if you move out, if the supply chains die out, it's very difficult to build that whole supply chain again.
Yeah, because it's an ecosystem. It's not just one company exactly. setting up one factory.
Yeah. And that doesn't mean obviously that you need to kind of, let's do everything, domestically. But at least, regionally, we need to have the kind of capabilities to kind of scale up then at some point in certain areas.
Yeah, and with dark factories, I mean, that's one area where I guess Finland would be quite well positioned because we have, especially as things are becoming electrified, because we have a relatively good grid. We have access to like pretty cheap and green electricity.
Yeah.
And okay, let's switch from kind of the top level kind of thinking about industries and so on, and talk specifically more about investment philosophy and looking at startups. Yeah, you've made 12, 13 investments.
Yeah, 13. Yeah,
13. So probably then you looked at hundreds, if not even more, companies, thousands. So in your what are the things that you're paying most attention to in the early stage of looking at a company? Like what's the immediate red flag, green flag?
Yeah. I think it comes a little bit what I was saying earlier. Like the big vision needs to be there. Otherwise, it's not kind of venture. But there also needs to be a plan to how to get there. So without the big vision, I think we are not interested, right? It needs to be. It needs to be kind of difficult to do, and not for the sake of being difficult, but that's probably how you're going to build, a durable business, by doing something that no one else has tried, or everyone else has failed in. So this kind of convincing kind of narrative, how to get there with the big vision, is something that is almost the kind of the first check mark in a way. Then there are a lot of, is the market, large enough? What's the competition? All of these things are obviously kind of comes after that. But the first thing I'm, thinking about, do I get excited? I think it started, I didn't really have that. I tried to kind of dig up, how will I get excited? Is there things hidden that I don't get? Why this is exciting? And now we're kind of, I think, at least, personally, more moving to, in 30 minutes, if this is exciting. If it's exciting, then you start doing, the work. But you need to get that kind of personal excitement as well from the companies.
And that's very true, because if that person is not able to excite you, they're not going to excite recruitments or sales. The big vision. So that's maybe then more about a big problem solve rather than a big market opportunity, or maybe both.
Yeah.
Maybe they go hand in hand quite often.
They probably go hand in hand, but someone who is just talking about the market, it's actually not super exciting. I mean, someone talking about, this is a $10 billion market, it's not really exciting.
If you get 1% of this huge
exactly.
$100 billion.
If every Chinaman, starts using it, it's the classic. So it's more concrete. It's on the problem. It's what you are solving and why.
Yeah.
I think that's exciting.
So what does that come from? Because obviously, it's one thing to be building these consumer apps. What does it require? What kind of person is the one who develops this exciting vision that appeals to you? Is it someone who's engineering background? They've spent like 10 years in the industry, being really frustrated by this one specific thing, or can it be people who are just have this? I don't know.
I think it's not one size fits all. We tend to invest, if you look at the kind of founders that we have in our portfolio, they are older, they have experience. It's difficult for a young person to kind of come up with these ideas if you've never been close to the problem. And almost all of our companies come in one way or the other out of the universities in terms of from real research, it's PhDs. And then every now and then, you meet someone who doesn't come from the industry, but just have such a convincing story, background, personal motivation of why they're doing things, that we also invest and get excited.
Yeah.
But on average, our founders are more technical, older. They come out from the universities.
You may have answered this, but are there any founder traits or skills that you think are consistently like overrated or underrated, things that people pay attention to when they shouldn't, or vice versa?
I mean, in the sector that we invest in, it's kind of important that you know what you're doing. It doesn't matter, how much vision you have and how much you want to do it. If you don't kind of understand, the physics or the, behind it. So just building a kind of FOMO around your company in this space that we invest in doesn't really help.
Yeah.
And they are obviously, you can say it's overrated. At the same time, I mean, great founders recruit great people, they get financing and they can solve it, they have the vision and they have the execution, and they don't know the nitty-gritty details. So you often have that as well. But in these very difficult sectors, to me personally, I think it kind of makes sense to kind of know the field.
Yeah.
If you're going to run a laser company, it probably makes sense that you know how lasers work. It's kind of,
It helps.
It helps.
Now you made these investments. Any patterns? And obviously, I mean, this is still early, especially like industrial companies. It's probably longer product sales cycles and everything. But you still have a couple of years with some of the investments of looking at them. Any patterns that emerge about those who are, able to get traction, able to succeed, whatever success looks like at this very early stage?
Yeah.
Anything that maybe is kind of, non-intuitive that you didn't know early on when you're picking those investments, and then you go, wow, this trade was actually like really key to them be able to get this far, or maybe, traits that do not lead to success.
Yeah. I think all teams are different. All teams are different. I mean, what happens all the time is kind of over-optimistic timelines, which is natural, and per se is not a bad thing. It's kind of by design in this industry, but it kind of leads to problems when you miss targets by very large factors, because it kind of impacts your fundraising as well. So I think the usual things what you say is a kind of good founder is, right? It's got big visions and it's speed, and to me it's also having kind of realistic, whatever that means, kind of expectations on what you can achieve, with the resources that you have right now and in the trajectory you are on. This kind of delusional view of where you are, it won't work out ever, I think. So you need to be at the same time, bold and big and beautiful, but you also need to understand kind of exactly where you are right now. And it's difficult. I mean, people are always kind of, it's more hope than knowledge in many cases, which is part of it. But I think those that are kind of grounded and understand how to spend your limited resources to get to realistic milestones, and it's the nitty-gritty grinding is I think what gets people there in the long run.
So you gotta you can't just be in it for the rich, the fame, and the rich and the glory. You gotta love the process.
I think you have to love the process and you have to love the problem. I mean, it will never work out if you somehow think about if you day one think about the exit, it's going to be difficult.
You're building for the road. Yeah.
But it's obviously our job to think about the exit. I mean,
yeah.
And it feels weird at some at points when you go very early in and you start talking about exit paths. But it makes you also. It's good to do that because it makes you get a view on the positioning in the market, on the competition, who could this fit in with, etc. Even though it's very far away at that point in time. But.
Yeah, and I guess your background with Altor is very helpful there because those type of companies may be one of the acquirers, and what they need to see in order to be interesting or interested in buying. Let's wrap up here with a couple personal question. What's one important thing that you've changed your mind about recently? Related to business, investing, or life in general.
Yeah. We have a portfolio company. Not going into details, but I think you tend to want to look at optics at times, and you tend to think that everything needs to fit a certain mold. And I was kind of very bullish on getting new people in as well, who have the experience, who've seen it, and then realizing that the kind of the strength of the team, of the company, was actually exactly in how they were doing business right now. And I think that this kind of, they are all different. The strengths, the teams, the specific situation, the specific company, they're always different. And trying to kind of break that by trying to force in, people with the CV is polished, they've done it before. And that was a situation that I, clearly changed my mind on. I had first this, let's kind of, push, boom, all the people in, and they're gonna grow big, and then actually kind of realizing that the strength was exactly how it is right now. It's difficult to see it from the CVs, but the kind of the team, spirit and how far they've come with exactly what they have right now. That's the kind of whole DNA of the company. So trying to kind of change the DNA of the company just because that's the way they should kind of look. These teams is
I think that's very true, right? Because these, especially early on, these organizations, the teams are very fragile. It can be the dynamic that they built is very crucial, and they built relationship with that key customer, and those things are really hard to put down on paper and really Do you have any contrarian beliefs, leadership, business, investing, that most of your peers would disagree with, probably disagree with?
Well, I mean, I think we are, our whole, thematically, part of it is contrarian in a way. We're building businesses that are going to take time to scale. Venture always been, scale, day one, explosive growth. We are never going to see that in our portfolio. It's going to be built over time, and it's going to be a long journey. But we believe that's the way you kind of build, durable, durable businesses that have, you know, very high kind of quality of earnings in a way at the end. So I think in itself that is a little bit not. I mean, nowadays it's a little bit trendy now to do hardware and to be industrial. And suddenly, you know, all the sustainability focused VCs are now suddenly, you know, resilience focused or defense. So the industry changes all the time.
It was a short gap between sustainability and defense. Turns out.
Yeah. So I mean, but so it's more trendy now. But I think, I mean, that was it was 2.5 years ago. So it's not like we had this crystal ball 10 years ago. But I think we genuinely, you know, believe what we are investing in, and we're genuinely excited. And we really think that, you know, this is an interesting area. But now, it's getting more trendy. But I think in a way it is fundamentally contrarian on kind of how we think about VC.
Yeah, agreed. Final question. I don't know. I guess for a lot of people, VC and investing is kind of a very exciting job, right? And maybe, you know, kind of what we talked about in the very beginning, like they don't realize all the grind it takes, but you know, it looks very interesting. You get to be on the other side of the table, making decisions, following companies, you know, having success, making deals, and then IPOs and all that. Anyway, so I think a lot of people think that it's exciting and they would want to get into it somehow. When you look back and you think about your career, consulting, then, you know, PE and now VC, and for you, there was that red thread of the industrial angle. But when you think back, is there anything that you would have done differently? Or let me just phrase this in the question, in kind of the angle of someone who would, as a maybe career advice to someone who would want to get into VC somehow, whether that's you know, as starting their own, which is quite difficult, obviously, but maybe getting in on some other way. So yeah, any advice or thoughts you have about that? Yeah,
I mean, maybe not VC in specifically, but in more general, I think my approach early in my career was, you know, very technical. I wanted to be very good at kind of what I do, which is, I guess, is a good thing. But what I'm trying to say is that I was very focused on just the product, just the kind of the work, and never about kind of how things look and how, you know, the people that how do kind of people view you in a way. And I think now I realized, specifically now in venture, I guess it's you are building a brand, you're building a positioning. So that's kind of also important of building a little bit of a personal brand along the way, and how you position yourself along the way, and just, you know, meeting people, you know, networking was something that I've never done that kind of in a strategic way. Things just kind of unfolded in a way. So I would spend more time on that part early on. Obviously, it's a balance. If you only do that, it's kind of, you know, but kind of, right, you need to be very good at what you do, but you also need to kind of show that, you know, you're good at what you do in a way. If that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. That is just, that I feel like that was exactly me. For the first 10 years, it was kind of head down.
Yeah.
Didn't care about, it didn't come natural. I didn't see the value in it.
Yeah.
And then I realized, oh, actually, that's something I should be doing. And that's actually how we met, because we
That's why I'm here.
Yeah, exactly. So, and, you know, but that's not, like a couple of years ago, that's not something I would have done. I would not have taken the time to send cold emails and try to meet people for lunch. So I agree with that. Anyway, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Best of luck with everything you got going on at Kvanted.
Thank you.
You know, existing portfolio, future investment, future potential funds.
Yeah.
There's a lot of exciting things happening, and probably a lot of challenges as well. But that's what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be hard.
Yeah.
Right.
There's more to come.
More to come. So yeah, thanks for coming on, and best of luck.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. You can find all episodes of The Growth Pod on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts.